Tuesday morning. It's June 3rd. It's about 29 minutes past the hour. Hope you're doing well today. And this is a story, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, that I think kind of got away from all of us, unless we were in the state of Colorado and obviously concerned with it as a Christian or a Catholic Christian more specifically. But it has to do with parental rights, First Amendment rights. And it's a measure now that has actually been passed and does have some real dire consequences in terms of how people in Colorado will be able to speak, express their faith and whatnot. And so we thought we would dive into that because, again, it was kind of buried and covered over because of all of, not purposely, but because there was so much news in the Catholic world, especially with the death of Pope Francis and the election of Pope Leo XIV. Brittany Vessely is the executive director of the Colorado Catholic Conference, and she joins us this morning. Brittany, thanks so much. I appreciate you being with us.
My pleasure to be here.
So give us a background on HB 25-1312, what it is, what happened, and where it stands today.
Absolutely. So on May 16th, Governor Jared Polis of Colorado signed into law HB 25-1312, which is called the Legal Protections for Transgender Individuals law. What HB 1312 is intended to do is provide certain legal protections for individuals in the protected classes of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression that are in Colorado's current Anti-Discrimination Act as of 2021. However, in reality, this new law discriminates against any institution, faith-based or private or individual with a different belief about human sexuality, and it forces all institutions and individuals to conform to government-mandated beliefs about sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, and now avoid intentionally misgendering or deadnaming, which is using your biological pronouns or birth name, under the threat of criminal and financial penalty.
Wow. So what is that going to look like? Do you know yet for the average faithful person just trying to live out their faith in the state of Colorado?
Absolutely. So there are now 3 lawsuits that are targeted against 1312 that were introduced just in the last month. And the Catholic Church is also considering our next move on this as well. I expect we'll probably be targeted because the reality of HB 1312 is this is an expansion of 2 other laws that have been put into the book in the last 3 years, specifically in the state of Colorado, starting with HB 21-1108, which changed that protected class definition to include, in our Anti-Discrimination Act, you have protected classes, and now it includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. So what 1312 ultimately did was now add misgendering and deadnaming to the violations against those protected classes. And in current law, there is a religious exemption for places that are, quote unquote, principally used for religious purposes. Colorado case law only defines that as places of worship or the 4 walls of a church building. So, and this was the case of the sponsor of the original law, HB 21-1108. He said, I want Catholic schools, Catholic hospitals, Catholic homeless shelters, and other faith-based institutions to be included in public accommodation and subject to those criminal and financial penalties for discriminating against those protected classes. So in reality, there's a few different things to look at here. You have individual impacts of just all citizens in the state of Colorado. You have faith-based institutions and individual private institutions that can now not live out their own faithful beliefs on human sexuality and marriage specifically. What I see probably happening for the Catholic Church is we're likely going to have a trans-identifying students or parents come to a Catholic school and want to do certain things that are contrary to the school's religious autonomy and integrity, which will immediately trigger CADA when the school says they cannot comply with what their demands are. So we can see a religious institution issue happening very quickly, but in the case of parental rights, there are also implications with deadnaming and misgendering that were taken out of 1312 as it deals with custody decisions, because it, in the original form of this law, made it so that it would be a criminal offense for a parent to and be involved in custody. We call it coercive control for a parent to not comply with their trans-identifying child's wishes concerning their sexual identity or gender expression, and that would be considered in custody decisions. While that section was taken out during the process in the legislature, it still technically applies because of our Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. So that's what also has brought forth two of the lawsuits that we now see today.
Wow. And so basically this is not only, as we noted, First Amendment rights, but as you said, parental rights as well are impacted here.
Exactly. So we're talking about parental rights. We're talking about individual First Amendment expression and 14th Amendment protections. We're talking about individual private businesses, which the U.S. Supreme Court has already ruled in the case of Colorado twice now with Masterpiece Cake Shop and 303 Creative. And we're talking about the impact on faith-based institutions, which has yet to be challenged. And that's something that, as the Catholic Conference, we're also very keen on.
Wasn't there a lot of public backlash, though, over this? And it didn't have any impact, or so it seems.
Oh, absolutely. Senators, when HB 25-1312 got over to the Senate, senators received over 18,000 emails each advocating against the bill. And the committee hearing brought nearly 700 Coloradans to the Capitol to testify against 1312. But Colorado has certain rules now that limit debate both for lawmakers, which is something that we had not seen before. I haven't seen in the 5 years I've been in the Catholic Conference, and I asked lobbyists who have been there for decades, and they haven't seen this as well, where there's a couple of rules that the Colorado legislative majority can invoke to limit debate from the minority, which is called Rule 14 and Rule 16. Rule 14 limits debate on the second reading of the bill when it hits the floor. Rule 16 limits debate on the third reading and final passage, which means that there's no ability to filibuster if they limit it to 2 hours, which is typical. But for the case of 1312, they removed all debate on Rule 16 for third reading and final passage. So the Republican Party, the Republican caucus, cannot at all argue against 1312. In addition, when it came to the committee hearing in the Senate, those 700 Coloradans, about 500 of them were turned away because the debate was limited to 4 hours for the opposition, and that only accounted for about 200 of the people who actually showed up wanting to testify. Many of those who were turned away were parents and families that brought their children and wanted to talk about the impact to their particular life. So only the experts were able to actually testify against the bill.
Oh, my gosh. So basically, here's what I see. I see a lot of people filing suit in addition to, for example, various churches, whether it be the Catholic Church or other entities, but filing suit because these parents, they can't stand for this. I mean, this is an invasion, literally an invasion of their privacy and how they want to raise their children.
Exactly. So that was one lawsuit that's already been brought forward from a group that's called Defending Education, and it was the plaintiffs are Colorado Parent Action Network and Protect Kids Colorado, two of the big parent advocacy groups in the state of Colorado. The Catholic Conference works very closely with both of those groups. We worked on the lobbying strategy against 1312 and the sister bill 1309, which expanded some of the criteria for what health insurance could cover for so-called gender-affirming care. But the parent advocacy groups that are in this lawsuit are advocating against gender ideology topics in schools and in places of public accommodation, its impact on individual businesses, because, as I mentioned, we already have 303 Creative. We already have Masterpiece Cake Shop.
Right.
But the Colorado Civil Rights Division keeps ignoring the U.S. Supreme Court's rulings on these cases.
We have to take a break, but Brittany, stay with us more on this important topic. Brittany Vessely is the Executive Director of the Colorado Catholic Conference. We'll be right back on a Tuesday morning, June 3rd, 2025. You're listening to EWTN, coast to coast and around the globe. We'll be right back.
This is a Messy Family Minute with Mike and Alicia Hernan. Social media has enabled us to be more connected than ever with the people from our past, friends who we rarely see, and family who live far away. This can be a great blessing, but when used without guidance by our children, social media can actually deform a child's development.
An essential aspect of a child's development is their relationship to the world. This happens through interactions between a child and their peers and a child and adults. Because of social media, most teens are overwhelmingly more influenced by their peers than by the adults in their lives. This is a problem.
94% of parents underestimate the activity of their children on social media. Don't be that parent. Use filtering and monitoring apps to protect your child and stay engaged in their tech use. Or better yet, hold off on introducing your child to social media. You want to be the strongest influence in your child's life for as long as possible.
For our full podcast on this topic and for downloadable resources, visit us at messyfamilyminute.org.
This is Father Joseph Mary of the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word. Let's pray with Mother Angelica.
Let's say a little prayer. Lord God, we are people who are very much like Thomas all our lives. We lack faith and we lack hope. We lose courage very quickly, Lord. Our pride prevents us from finding joy and self-knowledge and in the sufferings of the present moment. And so though faith is the threshold that allows me to see you in the present moment, give me hope, an increase of hope that will allow me to embrace you in the present moment. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Lord, I hope. Keep me from discouragement. Amen.
Welcome back, Catholic Connection on a Tuesday morning. Thanks for tuning in to this program, heard every day, 9 a.m. Eastern Time on EWTN. Check out all of our work at EWTN.com. This is such an important topic, and as Brittany and I were discussing this during the break, the fallout, Brittany, and by the way, chatting with Brittany Vessely from the Colorado Catholic Conference, the fallout for the church here is just, multi-dimensional. If you think of all the different charities in which the Catholic Church is involved, the hospitals, schools, this is a huge issue.
Yes, absolutely. So Colorado's Anti-Discrimination Act, which was changed in 2021 to include new protected classes of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, includes a religious exemption that are for places principally used for religious purposes. And that principally used is very important in Colorado case law because it only technically applies to the four walls of a church, places of worship, the places that Colorado considers places of worship. That means that Colorado's current Anti-Discrimination Act and the laws that were passed in recent years, which are amplified by this HB 25-1312, those laws are HB 21-1108 and HB 24-1124. They consider faith-based hospitals, clinics, charities, agencies, and other social programs like homeless shelters to be subject to the public accommodation clause that includes those non-discrimination classes of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. What this means in practical terms is it will require faith-based organizations to defer to a person's chosen gender identity and force them to either violate their religious beliefs to avoid civil liability or shut down entirely. And the state of Colorado cannot cover the cost of all the social programs the church provides our state. And that's we actually did a report from the Catholic Conference with Catholic University of America that showed that the Catholic Church in Colorado provides an economic benefit to Colorado of $4.8 billion annually through our hospitals, our schools, our charities. That's not something Colorado can cover. So this is going to become a major issue in the state of Colorado.
Well, here's what I don't understand, and maybe I'm missing something, but if you look at these issues, if you look at the last election, I know Colorado tends to be, and you mentioned this, and we were talking about this before we went on with your first segment. I mean, you're going the way of Washington State and whatnot, but this issue, when it comes to this gender ideology, in the last election, it was pretty much, even if people were, in different parties, it was pretty much either a 90-10 or 80-20 issue where the majority of Americans understood that this issue is being shoved in the face and down the throats of parents and others who, want to make decisions and help their kids, be raised the right way or however they felt. But, so this is not a winning issue. So why do you think the state keeps going in this direction?
The state of Colorado and other states that are basically pushing up against what the federal administration is doing when it comes to protecting parental rights in the First Amendment in our Constitution, this is just pushing forward the further radical agenda from the left, in particular hotbeds of progressivism, Colorado being one of them, and abortion is included in this. A couple of years ago, Colorado changed the definition of reproductive health care to include both abortion and gender-affirming care. So when we're talking about our new abortion financing bill that was also enacted this year in the state of Colorado and hasn't been talked about quite as much as the gender ideology bill, but those two go hand in hand. Taxpayers in the state of Colorado are now going to have to pay for elective abortion for all 40 weeks of pregnancy and for gender-affirming care for trans-identifying individuals as young as 12 years old. And that can include new procedures in the sister bill of 1312, which was HB 1309, we're talking about surgical procedures such as genital mutilation, hormone therapy, facial reconstruction, and bone reconstruction. Colorado has gone far off the rails, and largely that's due to responding to the federal administration's pushback on some of these horrific policies that violate parental rights. So that's why we're seeing the pendulum swing in the leftist states such as Colorado.
It's just to the point now where, though, it's just over the top. You have the case in California where the president is now talking about imposing some huge fines, and he's going after Governor Newsom for allowing a biological male to compete in various events and now to win these events, despite, the warnings against doing that. They just keep going forward, and I wonder, how much of this is being celebrated now because we're in, quote-unquote, Pride Month. What's the coverage been like in Colorado on this story in particular?
1312 has gotten a lot of coverage, both in the state of Colorado and nationally, and this is largely due to the efforts of Colorado Parent Action Network and Protect Kids Colorado, the Do No Harm Medical Association. There's been a lot of advocacy groups that are largely parent-led or medical professional-led against some of the really crazy things that are coming out of these laws that both violate parental rights. They violate religious freedom of faith-based institutions and private businesses. And they also violate the medical professionals' ability to operate with integrity. And I think that's actually going to be the next target in the state of Colorado. If I were to guess what the majority party is planning to do, because we do have a very strong LGBTQ caucus and a women's caucus in the state of Colorado that drives a lot of this policy. But I would anticipate an attack on Catholic hospitals because our Catholic hospital system is very big here in the state of Colorado, and there's already been talk about how our ethical and religious directives do not comply with Colorado's Anti-Discrimination Act because it does not allow Catholic hospitals or even the Catholic medical professionals to be able to perform abortion or perform so-called gender-affirming care against their religious directives. And that's going to be another very big hot button here in Colorado.
So what are the bishops saying about this? What are you hearing from the bishops?
The bishops are shocked with how far our very progressive majority party has gone in the state of Colorado. The bishops have spoken out in letters to the governor on abortion and so-called gender-affirming care and advocated for parental rights. We are starting to anticipate from a legal strategy what we need to do to protect our institutions and our faith-based community. And we're also applauding and supporting in any way we can those parental rights groups such as Parent Advocacy Network and Protect Kids Colorado, because they really are the tip of the spear when it comes to this issue specifically on gender-affirming care, because we're talking about kids as young as 12 years old being able to access some major reconstructive and hormonal therapies in the state of Colorado on taxpayer dollars. And if a parent has any type of disagreement with their child on this or with their other parents, that plays into custody decisions for that parent too. So this is why parental rights violations are at the forefront of this fight and are making this a big reality for most Coloradans and is shocking the nation and making this a big topic of discussion.
I'm looking at and doing some research, Brittany, for the story, looking at some of the comments that came in during the debate. One House Representative, Jarvis Caldwell, said the debate is about his children. He says, and this is in a floor speech that was shared online, "Who are any of you to tell me that my child can go to school and change her name without my knowledge? We are sick and tired of it. It's not about hate. It's about love, the love I have for my kids." I mean, it's just, sometimes you see this, you can't even believe this is happening. You were hoping that maybe we were starting to turn the corner in certain areas. I mean, I think in certain parts of the country we are, and yet in other areas we seem to be just going backward. Exactly.
And the problem with what Colorado continues to do is that the case law that directly applies to the state of Colorado, such as the 303 Creative case in 2024, the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, and also other cases such as the Massachusetts 1995 case, which was Hurley v. Irish American Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Group, that says that you cannot compel private citizens or organizations to convey a message that violates their First Amendment rights. This is all going straight into what Colorado continues to push forward. And the Civil Rights Division and the leadership in the legislature right now, they don't care. They don't care about case law. They're going to continue to push this narrative regardless of what the U.S. Supreme Court says, regardless of what the federal administration does. And it's going to cause a huge division in our country. One thing I keep saying when it comes to abortion is, to quote President Abraham Lincoln, and another violation of human rights and dignity. We cannot have a nation that's half pro-abortion and half pro-life and stand. And I think that's going to be a big issue in our country, and it has been, and it's becoming more so, especially in the state of Colorado. And this is the same thing for the LGBTQ, gender-affirming care issue. And those go hand in hand when we have reproductive health care defining abortion and so-called gender-affirming care as reproductive health care in the state of Colorado. And now we have taxpayer dollars covering both as well. And Planned Parenthood is also doing both of those things. So
exactly.
These fights are together.
Yeah. I'm looking at another quote from another senator during the debate. You need parental permission for a field trip or a football team, but not to change your name in the school record. That just doesn't make sense. That's a great point.
Exactly. And that's what was so confusing at the beginning of the Senate debate, the committee debate on this bill specifically. The sponsors came up to the mic, and so many parents were there to advocate against Section 2, specifically Section 2 of the bill, which added that language of coercive control for a parent and when it comes to custody decisions. So if there's a parent that disagrees with the other parent regarding their child's trans identity, that would be considered coercive control and be subject to a custody decision for the parent who violated that so-called identity issue with that child specifically. So they removed Section 2. They also later removed in the floor debate Section 3, which made Colorado a sanctuary state in 1312 for gender-affirming care. So, but even though those two sections were removed, Section 2 and Section 3 of the bill, everything still applies because Section 7 was still kept, which adds the definitions of deadnaming and misgendering in Colorado's Anti-Discrimination Act. And that is the bigger issue in the state of Colorado, are those three bills in the last 2 years that have been passed that have those new protected classes of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, and how the Colorado Civil Rights Division interprets that when it comes to issues related to custody decisions with the courts, but also when it comes to public accommodation questions for faith-based institutions and private businesses, which we've already seen now with 303 Creative and the Masterpiece K-Shop decisions.
So can this measure and all the fallout from it, can it be put on hold while these lawsuits are going through the legal system, or no? I mean, how would that work? I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just trying to, in terms of the adjudication process, can it be put on hold?
So they added a safety clause to 1312 and 1309, which means it's enacted immediately. So there is no putting on hold of these bills. As soon as Governor Polis signed both of those laws, those became enforceable and probably will be, considering the track record of the Colorado Civil Rights Division. So I think while we're going to watch how this unfolds, both with the lawsuit that was filed by Colorado Parent Action Network, Colorado Parent Advocacy Network, and Protect Kids Colorado, but also two additional lawsuits that ADF, the Alliance Defending Freedom, have also filed against the state of Colorado concerning both 1312 when it comes to protecting women's sports and also protecting Christian camps that's having to deal with some of the issues around Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. Those will still continue to make their way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, hopefully, and be able to add some enforceability against the state of Colorado and the Colorado Civil Rights Division, because they continue to ignore anything that comes down from the federal side, too.
Yeah, it's like, whatever, we just do what we want here. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that we're the other way around. If conservatives are trying to do that, there's no way they would allow that to happen. Well, Brittany, God bless you. Thanks for being so strong and such an excellent spokesperson for the church in Colorado. What can we do? What can our listeners do in addition to prayer?
I think paying attention to where the case is and continuing to share the message. A lot of this is just, it's word of mouth. It's parents realizing, wait, if the state of Colorado can violate parental rights in such an atrocious way, so can any other state as well. And we be very much aware and vigilant for our rights as parents, and then also our First Amendment rights as Americans.
What's your website?
The Colorado Catholic Conference is cocatholic.org, and you can find more information there.
Brittany, thank you. Excellent spokesperson and lots of information. Really appreciate it. Brittany Vessely, Executive Director for the Colorado Catholic Conference, and we'll keep you updated on this developing story. We'll be right back.